Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a writing coach, a manuscript editor, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one-to-one with me, and I'm one-to-one with Clay Stafford. There he is. Clay is the founder and CEO of Killer Nashville, the International Writing Conference or Writers Conference. So, Clay, welcome. Uh,
Thank you. And what you didn't say, John, is you're an all-around great guy. So
well, it takes one to know one. Thank you very much. Look, I've known you for a long time, but not nearly as long as you've been around. I mean, you've got
that's
quite a
supposed to
career. Well, I've been around longer than you have. I've been around mostly longer than just about everybody else. But I know that you're tremendously experienced. But I want to ask first of all, do you remember your first writers conference? The one that a writers conference that you attended as a wannabe author.
Yes, I do.
What
Yes,
was
I do.
that like? Do you remember how you felt?
I felt overwhelmed. And there were people that who were real writers who were doing all sorts of things that I only dreamed about doing, and they were talking about things that I had no idea and had never thought about. And I sat in the auditorium of the Tivoli Theater in downtown Chattanooga, listening to Southern. It was a Southern festival, a book festival, and listening to um, these people talk, and I was overwhelmed. I was completely overwhelmed by the entire experience.
Have you been able to deconstruct why you were overwhelmed?
Well, it's just because I was a newbie coming in, and I didn't know anybody who was there. I the and I was a university student at the time, and I knew no one who was there. And the things that they were talking about, I mean, these were people like Reynolds Price and Kay Gibbons, and people that obviously knew what they were talking about. And I had never been exposed to those things. I was a great reader, and I had written things myself and actually had things published myself. But in terms of breaking it down and stuff, I was completely lost and in some ways confused and certainly overwhelmed. I left there wondering if I wasn't the stupidest person in the entire auditorium. You know.
Are you an extrovert or an introvert?
That's a big discussion at our house. I think I am an extrovert who likes to have his time alone, and but I love people. I think that's the thing I enjoy about writing, and I think I enjoy getting to know characters, like nonfiction memoirs and stuff. I love all of that, but I also enjoy being with people. And we've been together at Killer Nashville, and you've seen. I mean, I thrive meeting new people and seeing old friends. And so I'm always like the guy that's I really don't want to go to this party with you, John. And then once we get to the party, I don't want to really go home, John. That's tends to be my thing. So I
um,
would
well,
go ahead.
you're a tremendously approachable person, and that I think adds to. I mean, Killer Nashville is big, but it's not. It can be overwhelming, I think. But you certainly set the tone for friendliness and approachability and a connection. You are a connector. You definitely know how to put people in touch with each other, uh, uh, finding skill sets that complement one another, and you bring in tremendous talented writers, editors, agents. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts at Killer Nashville.
Well, the main thing though, I just love writers, and you know that, John. And I love storytellers. It doesn't matter what media they're telling the story in. I love storytellers, and it's just very enjoyable to me to put those together. And then I do behind the scenes things. You know that I'm a producer, and I do a lot of behind the camera work in orchestrating and putting together deals and situations, and you say connecting people. And so I think it's just a natural outgrowth of what I do on a daily basis.
When did you found Killer Nashville and
Two,
why?
2006, and it's just it's a I wanted I had Ellis at the time, my son, and it was important to me to be around with him, and I was missing all of the conferences that were taking place all around because it was really important to me to be a stay-at-home dad with him, and be there every night to read him stories before he went to sleep. And I think, even now looking back, I made the right. He's in college, but I made the right choice to be there for the family. But I was lonely and missing, and I've had a university background as well, so I love being around people who talk academic and who theorize and who have new experimental things to share. And I just decided that there's nothing like a mystery thriller suspense conference at all in this area. You had to go down to Florida, but we had the Southern Festival of Books, which is incredible, but that's a book festival. It's not a conference. And so I came home and told, I had a PR agency going at the time, and I came home and told my head PR guy and Jacqueline, my wife, I want to do a conference. And they said, when do you want to do it? And I said, let's do it in August. And this was June, and they were like, "What?" And so the first year, that was 2006. The first year I did it, I called my writers friends and I said, "I'm having a big party at a hotel in Nashville. Come." And that was how it got started in 2000.
How has it evolved since 2006?
I think part of it too is how have I evolved since 2006, and I think once again I continue to learn, I continue to grow. I don't, I'm not one of those who thinks I really know what I'm doing. Every time I sit down to start a project, I'm not sure. I feel like I'm the stupidest guy in the room, and there may be other people in the room, but I feel like I'm the stupidest guy in the room, and I've done this. I've done this enough, and I've got to, I've done okay for myself, and so I just, I, I guess that's pretty much it.
Well, but I mean, did you start having agents and editors at your conferences early
I
on?
started. I think as you know, I go around and talk to people a lot at Killer Nashville, and then Killer Nashville is a year-round event for me. It's a year-round volunteer event for me, and I'm in touch with people, and I get suggestions about what people are needing and what people are wanting, and I incorporate those. So agents, I think, if I'm not mistaken, came in 2007 because the people in 2006 that were the newbies said that they would really love to have an agent, and so that was how that came to be. You've worked in the business, and so you know how directors are. We steal everybody's best ideas, right, and then claim them as our own. And
Hadn't heard that one.
a lot of the changes that have taken place have been because of people who have interests in areas or needs in areas, and I've tried my best to accommodate them as best I can. And also to address, because Killer Nashville was one of the, when self-publishing first came out, Killer Nashville was right on the forefront of that in terms of being a spokesman for diversity publishing. Killer Nashville was on the forefront prior to that. So we've been on the forefront on a lot of things, and I think a lot of that has to do not so much with my own awareness, but my own ability to listen to people who are connected in some way to some other happening within the business, and then I just I take that and say, if that's affecting one person, then it's probably affecting others, and we need to look at that and expand and maybe make a track. We're adding another track this year. I mean, we've got 5 tracks. Now we're going to 6 tracks. So
what are the 6 tracks, and what's the 6th that you added?
Well, there's just a lot of content. I think that where I'm trying to move now is more into the other tracks have remained the same. There's nothing that's going to be different about the marketing track or the beginning writing tracks and the publishing tracks and the publicity and everything tracks and the forensic track. I mean, those are all there. But I'm looking at adding something that's a little bit more academic, and I'm tying it into slowly tying it into a university here in Nashville as well. And so we're pulling in more academic, just look at like one of the topics. They said, "What do you want to talk about?" And I said, the feminism in early crime novels, the introduction of feminism and the way women are portrayed, and it's a little bit more theoretical, but yet at the same time, the better we are as readers and the better educated we are in where we come from, the better writers that we are right now. We know what's been plowed before, and we also have an idea of where things are going. And I think it's great for writers to not only look at the real nuts and bolts, which has been a mainstay of Killer Nashville, but also to bring in some of that theoretical stuff that I miss in the university setting.
When you talk about that, are you also suggesting that nonfiction is going to be something that will be part of that track? Because right now the emphasis is on, I don't know, crime fiction, I suppose, right?
Well, it's on anything that really incorporates mystery, thriller, and suspense. And if you look at the Silver Falchion Awards or the Claymore Awards, we've got a lot of different categories that cover into that. But what I'm looking at is what was the original slant of the question, John?
Well, if you're adding sort of nonfiction to the
Yes,
fiction
absolutely.
element.
Nonfiction. I'm glad you pointed that out because you and I have talked about some nonfiction this past year, and I have to say that um, John DeDakis is one of the reasons that I'm looking at more nonfiction this year, because we were actually talking about writing memoirs and stuff this past year when we were at Killer Nashville, and I thought, research methods and nonfiction and true crime. So in
True
that
crime.
that track that I'm talking about, adding, that's where all of that is going to be going. I've been able to orchestrate the space, the hotel that we're in, and I've freed up some space to be able to offer that additional track. And so I'm wanting, I think the and creative nonfiction. I'm looking at that. I really want to have a section on memoir this year, and that's really, I'm not blowing smoke. That really is coming from our discussion last year.
My goodness.
And so I really think that there's I've got a wonderful, wonderful, well lauded poet who's actually coming also to talk about poetry in the vein of Poe and Stephen King and Peter Straub. And
Wow.
because we as writers tend to think of long form, but the short form as well, including poetry, we write it, but maybe let's kick it up a notch and write it into something that's like that, and get some stuff published in short form. So I mean, I'm even looking at poetry this year. But yes, nonfiction is really the direction that this extra track is going, and nonfiction in all of its formats, from memoir to creative nonfiction to true crime.
That's excellent. I mean, I started going to writers' conferences probably in about 1998 when I was still trying to write my first novel. And I'm such a slow learner. And I remember going to the Harriet Austin Writers' Conference at the University of Georgia, and I would go for every year for 7 or 8 years. And I finally figured out query the agent before you go to the conference, and that's how I found my agent. And so, and that was still early on. I mean, I was making all kinds of mistakes. I was bringing my 150,000 word tome and, hoping someone here, would you like to read
Read
it?
it,
Doesn't,
read it.
yeah, it doesn't work that way. So I guess my question, I mean, I've got so many questions, but one is, what are some of the do's and don'ts about going to a writers conference? What can you tell someone who's never been to a writers conference, how they can make it a successful experience for them, especially if they're shy or introverted?
I think one thing right off the bat is to research the tone of the conference itself to find one that's a good match for you. Because there are big ones, as you know, that are overwhelming and that are fun, and they've got big energetic people there. But if you're not a big energetic person, you could easily get lost in that
Mhm.
situation, especially if you're not used to going. If that's your first experience, it'd be very easy to get lost. So I would research carefully, look for something in your area that fits into what you're doing. The local community, there's always writers conferences that are taking place with the writers groups, the meetup groups in your local community. I mean, check those out first, because those are not as overwhelming in those particular situations you're talking about. Go ahead.
Do you get the feedback that Killer Nashville is overwhelming for some people?
Actually, I don't. I get the
Yeah.
feeling about. I mean, you've got a better perspective of Killer Nashville than I do, John. So you tell me basically what the feel is. But
Well,
I
it's big, but it's not overwhelming. But I mean, I'm sort of a shy extrovert with introvert tendencies. So I it sounds like you and I are a lot alike.
what
And and I find that I've come across shy people there, but I mean I'm the kind of person who is able to bring someone out of their shell, but uh, it can be a place where you get lost if you let it, but you need to take some proactive steps as well. I mean, let me ask it this way:
okay.
what are some mistakes that people make when they go to a writers conference? Are you able to identify anything like that?
Well, once again, I think, it was back when I was teaching at the university, I would say that, it doesn't really matter if you're going to this university or some other university. I think it's what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And I think that that's really what you need to do when you go to a writers conference. Kind of identify ahead of time really what your priority is or priorities are, and make sure that you get those. Look ahead online if possible, and see who's going to be there. See who the people you need to connect with. See who the people that you don't know that you might want to reach out, as you said about the agent. Reach out ahead of time and connect with those people so that when you're there, there's at least a little bit of a framework of a relationship that's already in place. The first thing I am big on, just throw yourself in all of the mixers in Killer Nashville. We start out Thursday evening with the Shine and Wine, which is local moonshine and wine, and it's a great place just to mingle and mix. And all of the agents and editors are usually there. If some plain schedule is on track, but they're usually all there. And so there's mixers at Killer Nashville all the way through, and some of these people have come wanting to make deals. And as you know, they make deals in the bar. They make deals in the agent editor roundtable sessions we have. And I think we just really need to identify and take full advantage. I think people like to come and put their toe in the water, and I don't really think that's the way to do anything. If you really want to get something out of it, look at it like you're going to an amusement park and look at all the rides that you want to ride and the experience that you want to have. And then when you go there, make sure you have that. And if you've been there years but every year I say the same thing, John. I say, if you're not getting what you came here for, come see me because I will help you get that. I mean, you've heard me say that.
Yes.
And so I really believe that people should decide ahead of time where they are in their career and what they need, and then plan it out just like you would going to Disney.
You mentioned the wine, the wine,
The Shine and Wine.
shine and wine thing. Interestingly, your grandfather was a bootlegger. Am I mistaken about that?
It's absolutely true.
Tell us that story.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that I know all of the stories associated with that. I just know bits and pieces. I know he had a lot of scars on his body that he would occasionally tell me where this one came from and where that one came from, and some of them I'm surprised that he even survived. But
Ooh.
I do remember the story, and I tried to, we both have the former assistant director of TBI, as a friend of us mutually, and I asked him. I said, how do you know about the disappearance of FBI agents? And he said, oh, there's so many just people who have disappeared during that time. But with my grandfather, two FBI agents came up to the house and said, Mr. Parker, we've seen your still. Now, he was very clever. He pulled down pine trees and tied the stills to the pine trees, and then let the stills go up when not in use. So when you walk through, most people don't look up,
Right.
and so he had them hanging up above, and you had to look up to be able to. But they identified that, and so they went off. He said, "I don't know what you're talking about," and so he went off with them. And then about an hour and a half later, he came back and got in their car and drove their car away. And and don't know where he took the car, and I don't know where the two FBI agents are that did not come back to the car, but that was the kind of environment that it was back then. This is Appalachia at its
Yeah.
time.
Well, and my dad was his first law job was in Chicago, working for a firm that defended Al Capone. He remembers
Ah,
Al Capone coming into the office. So,
well,
so
my cousin Floyd was actually, and they ended up putting him in jail until he found out he couldn't speak, comment on it. But he went down to Florida to play cards at Capone's, and so we might have had a little bit family back, crossing back at that point. My cousin, he got out, much older than me. He got out of jail in Miami and immediately went to Cuba. So
have
I,
you?
I have a long line of colorful people in my lineage, John.
Well, probably more colorful in my background, but you mentioned memoir. Have you thought about writing a memoir? I don't think you've done one, but you
I have
certainly
not. I
should.
have not, and I think about it. And I'm not kidding you, John. Since our conversation together, I think about it
Good.
probably
Oh, good.
once every 2 weeks, if not sooner. That really I should, jot some things down, and then I just kind of step away from it. And so
Why? Why do
I,
you step away?
I have no idea, John. I don't know if it's just. I just don't know where to start. You and I've talked before, and I'm like, I've, I've heard my stories before, and you after you tell them a while, they get kind of boring.
Yeah, but it's a legacy. It's a legacy, and there are probably cautionary tales and lessons to
There
live
are a lot of
by.
cautionary tales, yes,
Yeah.
but I just haven't. As a matter of fact, it's on my list to talk with you more at the conference this year about the whole memoir thing. I even bought the you would recommend two books to me, and I've purchased those, and I've actually read one of them and half the other one, and
Okay.
I'm still just I'm still tire kicking. So uh,
Okay, well that's fair enough because it brings up memories and memories bring up emotions and
and
the
how's your memoir coming? Because you're
well, I'm
as well.
glad you asked because it's gone through 4 drafts and now it's with my key beta reader who is my wife. And that means that it may never see the light of day.
Isn't
She's
it wonderful?
yeah, I mean well, and this is your anniversary, am I right?
It's anniversary of our first date, 29 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful wife and she's probably long suffering and
But
um,
isn't it great to have an honest editor? Let me tell you a story with Jacqueline. When we
go
first,
ahead.
after we first, we dated a year and a half before we got married in different cities. And so the first time we were actually together in the same city as the one we got married in. And she, I always let her be my first reader. And so I would never say anything. She would just come home, and when it was time for bed, she would see the paper clipped manuscript laying there on her side of the bed. And so she would read it, and then she'd, give me some great things I needed to work on and tell me how, this was good. And it was really nice. It was insightful. It was, all the positive things. And then one day I put it there and she said nothing and she went to sleep. Well, the next morning she got up and she was having breakfast. And I said, Jacqueline, did you read the short story last night? And she said, yes. And I said, oh, what'd you think of it? She said, not your best work. And I said, oh, of course you're crushed, right, John?
Yeah, that's awful.
And then I said, what do you think I need to do? What needs to be fixed? And she said, I think I just throw it away.
Oh dear.
And I thought at that moment,
Ooh.
it was crushing, but at that moment, I thought, this is the perfect first reader. As you said, it may not see the light of day, but at least you got a great, honest opinion from it.
Absolutely. I mean, wives are tremendous. In fact, Cindy wouldn't. She did not read my first novel until it was much farther along because she said I didn't know if you were any good, and I didn't want to break your spirit. And then when she did read it, it was like 150,000 word mishmash, and she underlined one word and said, "Are you sure you want to use that word?" Which is great, but what about the other, 149,999 words? So,
We digress.
which is part of what it's all about. Let's go back to I mean, you're a very creative person. I mean, you've been an actor, you've been a showrunner. In fact, let me ask you this: what's a showrunner? What was that like? What did you show run on, and what did you learn from that experience?
It was a couple of series, and then also some, documentary as well as fictional series. And basically, what you do is make sure that you're basically the producer that makes sure that everything gets done, and you work your way up to that position of being in the industry and showing your reliability. And as you well know, two things: you come under budget and under time, and both of those things are just the mantra that you live by. And when you so basically it covered pretty much everything. It was just a producer position, but it's actually one that keeps the pace of everything that's going. And I had several producers and things working under me at the same time, associate producers and assistant producers, and that really helped out. So it's a team effort, but it's really the general, in the field. It's not like the executive producer, somebody that's off in an office somewhere. You're actually the guy on the field, making sure that everything happens.
Would you say your life has turned out the way you expected?
It has way, way exceeded what I had expected.
What were
And
your initial intentions as you were coming of age?
I just wanted to write a story.
Yeah.
That's a bit of anticlimactic, isn't it? I thought about being a veterinarian. I thought about being in law, and
Same here.
back when I was getting my MFA, I was at the University of Miami, and I took many of the law courses there at the university, and they really encouraged me to go into entertainment law. And I just wanted to write. That's all I wanted to do. It's kind of like Rick Larson at Universal Studios gave me an executive position when they were moving down to Orlando for either in development or production, whichever side I wanted to be on. And I was excited and flattered at first, and then I really went back to, I just want to tell some stories, and I want to create some stories. And so I felt, that was not the best route to go. So really my ambition has never changed. To be able to work with the people that I have worked with, to be able to have the experiences that I've had are way beyond everything that I ever wanted, ever thought would be possible. Growing up, I had three icons, which you and I talked about, I think, at the interview we did at Killer Nashville. But I had three icons there, and by bumbling, and that's what I call it, bumbling through life, I ended up being able to work in proximity, either for or with or associate with all three of them. And the different people. I mean, it was. I remember back, just the experiences. I mean, it's just the experiences that I've had, John, getting to know people such as yourself. I mean, without the trajectory that we've gone, you and I have never connected. And you've been a great blessing to me. You don't know it, but you have. And
Well,
so.
thank you, but this is about you, sir.
Well, I thought we were talking about.
But here's the thing: you wanted to write, but you also, you're an actor, and I mean, there's so much. Well, there's a lot of showbiz
Yeah,
that's part of
I
too.
wanted to tell a story. I think that's really what it was. I really love storytelling, and there's a lot of different media. I mean, whether it's a 30-second commercial or a full feature film or a 13-part series, or whether it's a book or a short story or even just a haiku, with what 15 vowels in the whole thing. I think that there's a lot that can be done in that, and that's really, I think, what I try to get across at Killer Nashville, and why we're a bit more diverse in the people that we have and some of the topics that we have, because we hit a more, I think, a more diverse curriculum than what you get at many writers' conferences. You can tell me more about that because you go to more than I do. But I think that the nuances that we hit and stuff are really just looking at the various aspects of storytelling itself and all sorts of media.
Based on your experience, how difficult is it to get a book onto either the big screen or made into a TV series? Is it easier now than it's ever been, or harder? What's your impression?
But honestly, I think it's harder. I think, and that's simply because there's more books and there's more people who are wanting to write. There's more film programs now. There's more MFA programs now. There's more people being channeled. You know, back when I started out, and I think that there are windows in my life. I have noticed periods of windows where people were able to step in, and there was a period in my lifetime of a window that I was too young for, and Spielberg and Lucas and those guys, Scorsese, all of those guys were able to move in at that point because things changed, and then it was almost hard to get things became more corporate, the environment changed, and then there was another period when the digital stuff came in, which was a leveling of the platform across the board, that more people could start making films, and the access was different. If you could bring in something, low budget became the thing, and that's where I entered in. And I think there's these certain windows that happen. And I don't believe that it's just one window in your lifetime, but I think there's several windows. But if you miss one window, sometimes it's a little hard as you wait around for the next one. But as a great actor once told me, I was feeling very frustrated, and he said, kid, you just stay around here, just keep going at it as long as you want, and eventually people are going to die, they're going to give up, they're going to drop out, they're going to have families, they can't afford to be an actor anymore, and you're going to be there, so just stick with it, kid.
You like that kid thing now, right?
Yeah, I do, and the actor uses kid a lot.
The takeaway with that, one of the things I'm hearing between the lines is that probably the key to success, or if success means getting published or getting your work out there in some form, is just to do your work, do it well, and because that's what you love to do, and the rest will, in a sense, take care of itself, so long as you are available and in the mix, which brings us back to writers' conferences, because that's where you can hone your craft. That's where you can discover what you're good at and what you need to get better at. And the rest, I think what I'm hearing you say is the rest will take care of itself if you keep on that trajectory, as opposed to being too specific about it must be this.
Yeah, and I think that you need to be yourself. I think that's very important, because that's the voice that we're always trying to help people develop, and it takes courage to be your voice. And I think, but that's what's going to separate you from everybody else. And then for me, as I said, what did I want to do? I just wanted to tell a story. So I think if you keep that focus, it really doesn't matter. It takes a lot of the pressure off, John, because you don't have to tell a good story. You can tell a bad story, but you're telling a story, and the fun is just in telling the story. Now, if other people start thinking it's good, and the more you do it, the better you get. The more you read, the more you see the mistakes that you make, and so you keep going along. And eventually, I do think things rise to the top, as you've seen from Killer Nashville, how some of the people have been, the trajectories over the years that people have had. I think about people like Jonathan Stone. Do you know Jonathan?
I don't know.
Okay, Jonathan Stone. He was one of our Claymore entrants, and ended up He's a wonderful guy, just loves to write. He's an advertising guy and in New York, and he just loves to write. And he had a manuscript in his drawer for 13 years, but didn't want to show it to anybody. And he decided, I think his wife encouraged him, but she said, submit it. And he submitted it, won. And then he got with an agent that you and I both know. And within like 2 weeks after winning the Claymore, he had a movie deal. He had his agent, and then he sold the book. Yeah, all of that. And for 13 years, that thing had been sitting in the drawer because there's no confidence. And I think that's another thing that the writers' conferences will do for you, is help you get around people who, writers are incredibly supportive people. And that's the foundation of Killer Nashville anyway, the idea of giving back. And I think a lot of writers' festivals are like that. Of course, there's the ego festivals, but then there's also the ones where they're actually trying to help people, and people are there for a different reason. And I think those are really advantageous for building your own self-confidence and your own network.
Yeah, when I was at that conference in Georgia, there was this light bulb moment where I was just sitting and talking to an agent. There was not a pitch session. There was nothing formal going on. We were just sitting there talking about our kids. And it was like, this is just a guy. He's just a guy. And it really brought it down to the human level. And because it's so easy to put people on pedestals and be intimidated, and yet when you hear good writing, you can either be intimidated into giving up, or you can say, I want to emulate that. How can I get better? Um,
Well, it,
Go ahead.
and I was just going to say, and in other places too, but at Killer Nashville, in order, there have been every now and then there'll be somebody that I go, I don't really think they have the Killer Nashville mentality to be a part of it, because when everybody who comes has been told ahead of time, from the forensic people to the writing people to the agents and editors, you have to give out your business card. You have to give people access to you, and it has to be a long-term thing, and that has to be something. You have to be a resource to these people, and these writers come every year and give of themselves, and it's just an incredible experience. And they've all had the same, kind of hardships that you and I have gone through, the alleyways we've gone down and had to turn around and come back, and all of the different things that they've all been there, and they all know, and they are all very encouraging, and try to save us from some of those detours that we want to take.
One of the things I have on the screen right now is that you have you've sold nearly 4 million books in 16 languages. Now you've been running Killer Nashville since 2006. Do you still have time to write?
I do, and then I write all the time, and I write every day. I'm a 3 to 4 hour a day writer every day, weekends as well, and that's just my thing. Now, do I have an ambition to publish everything that I write? No, I don't. I've it's kind of odd, John. You get to a certain point where you kind of like feel like you've been there and you've done that, and you don't necessarily have to do that. But I am working. My agent has screwed me down tightly into my chair and told me that there are 2 books that he needs from me, and has indicated that there is some interest in both of these books. And so I think that I'm probably, these will probably, I'll allow them to see the light of day. But I do write.
How far along in the process are you on one or both of those?
One of them, I'm putting together the first draft, and the other one is probably in its 6th, 7th, 8th draft.
Well, are you a planner, seat of the pantser, plantser? How would you describe your process?
I am very abstract in what I think. I get an idea for something, and if I don't remember that one, I will write it down, and because I will not remember it later on when I want to write. And what I do, I pretty much have an idea of a beginning and an end, and I don't necessarily know how it's going to get from one to the other. And so I start living with the characters and then the plot, and I tend to mix. So I do a lot of stewing in my head before I ever do anything, and you'll find me start organizing things in file folders, like a file folder for each chapter or each section, and I'll have little clipped out notes I'll drop down in there. and then I just start building that around, and eventually I've got something that I feel like I can work with. But I don't feel like I would. I don't know. I'm too scattered to say I'm, just basically a person who puts together a plot, because really things come to me in fragments. But I will not begin writing until I've really seen it, until I have seen the story several times in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like back in my film training, and especially from one of my old bosses. He did storyboards all over the place and would not do anything without the storyboard. And the storyboard, for those who don't know, is just looks like a you turn to the comics section of your newspaper and you see the different framing and stuff of that. So that's a storyboard. But the man I used to work for and would just plaster walls with storyboards of the projects that he was working on. And so he'd come in and take off one of them and put something else up and fix something and move it around here. And, and eventually it was all laid out. And then he would decide it was time to shoot. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean all the props worked. He had a shark that didn't work in one of these productions that he was doing. So he had to redo everything, but still he was back at storyboards on those, even when a mechanical failure occurred. So I'm
And
pretty much like that.
yeah, given your how busy you are, and of course a lot of writers have, a life that's not just the full-time writing life. How long would you say is a realistic expectation for being able to write a novel if writing is not your full-time job?
I don't know how to give an answer to that, because some things, as you know, come out like fire, and then other things tend to plod. And so I think it really depends upon what's going on. I decided one day, and this is one of the novels in the trunk novels that's in the wings waiting to come out, that I'm going to
The
release after
trunk,
after
the
this.
trunk novel is, it's in the,
You throw it in the trunk. You write it
yeah.
and you throw it in the trunk. And so I've got one there, but this one was a short story for me. I had thought about something to do with life, and I thought, what if? And so I was taking Ellis to preschool, and I came home, and then I sat down, and I thought, I'm going to write this. And I sat down, and in 3 months, I had written a 375,000 word short story. But it just poured out, and I've had two agents since that time, and both of them have looked at it and gone, how can we divide this into a trilogy? And it's like, you really can't, because it's one trajectory. I don't know how to do it, but I think I've figured it out now.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
But yeah, but that was 3 months for a 375,000 word tome, and it just came out like wildfire. Well,
That's
you could
incredible.
you could
It's
spend.
probably therapeutic, wouldn't you
Yeah,
say?
it is, and that was written with no outline at all, which is why I always caution, you need to have some sort of framework before you start, because having been there, if you don't have, there are a lot of fun places to run down, when you're writing. And if you don't have some sort of framework that kind of keeps you in the lines to some degree, you're going to end up with an unpublishable 375,000 word tome that, if somebody wants to sit, and I actually read the 375 multiple times and thought, this is a really good story, but nobody
Okay.
with their right mind would publish this thing. What it needs to be is divided up
Yeah.
into a 4-season TV episode. I think,
There's a maw that needs to be filled. So there's some people who are asking questions in the chat, and I'm going to
I
show
thought it was
one.
just you and
It
I.
is, but there have been people watching, and
Well, I'm glad I
oh,
haven't said it, but
yeah,
that's not
there,
supposed to be
yeah,
edited out, John.
yeah, there's a peanut gallery here, and I want to give them a chance to weigh in. Let's see if we can see this. Noreen is saying, I would like to learn more about adapting a book manuscript into a screenplay. Even if the book was not published yet, is it about the story, or publish the book and have sales to sweeten the pot for the chances of a movie? So she's got an idea. Should she do the book first and then maybe see about adapting it and make it into a screenplay,
You know,
or just go the?
I'll give you a little anecdotal story on that one that I was privy to because I was at the studio at the time. Kevin Costner had a writing friend, and that was wanting to had a great screenplay that he had already written, and Costner read it and said, "His Dances with Wolves." I think, and he read it and he said, "I tell you what, it's going to be easier for me to get it through the system if you will publish it, write it as a book." He'd already written the screenplay, but write it as a book and get it published, and then I'll have a better chance of getting it through.
Why is that?
Because there are so many established and well-known screenwriters right now that you're really trying to get in front of the line, of them. And these people are trusted screenwriters and they're trusted storytellers, and they've got relationships with the directors already, and they're pleasant to work with. And so if you've got an ideal person, if you've got 12 ideal people to work with, why are you looking for somebody else? So really, I think that probably the book route would be the way to go for that. And then really, 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 if it's a good book, really strategize it and make it part of your publicity plan to approach studios and send the book in to readers. And that's how they usually get found. You send them in to the readers. And I would not necessarily just look at, say, like Universal or Disney or something like that. I'd look at John's production company and look at what John has done and know that John's got some connections. So your better entry into the system is to find an independent producer somewhere rather than a large studio itself, because they're the ones dealing with the stable of people that they've been working with for some time. And so get John excited about it, and then John will take it to his friend who happens to be at Universal, and maybe get some interest going that way. And that's how I've seen most people do the best of luck with that. And then if you've never written a screenplay, I'd be cautionary about writing the screenplay yourself. But if you want to do it, go for it. You can easily, find tutorials and teachers and stuff to help you get the format down and what you can do. But once again, you're going to be, and let me emphasize there, to keep your name on that script itself. If it goes into production, be sure that the plotting of it is so tight that they really can't unravel anything, because your name can be pulled off of that particular project and another screenwriter given credit for it. It can be a story by you, but you'll get pulled off. But if you make the plot tight, so that if they unravel any of it, which they can't because the plot is so tight, then you're going to always be there as the screenwriter.
Hollywood is very fickle, right?
I don't know, having worked in it, I think it's an excellent business. They are like any manufacturer, but it just happens to be, back when I was in the studio, just the below the line budget, which includes cameras and sound and, set and props people, you were running $80,000 a day. And you talk about 3 months of filming, you just add that up, and that's not counting star salaries, director salaries, or anything like that. So it's a manufacturing company where the one product costs an incredible amount of money. So in that case, and they answer to stockholders and things just like anybody else, have to stay in business. And so to say they're fickle, I'm not so sure about that, but they really have to be very careful about what projects they're making, just because they are so labor and monetarily expensive.
You mentioned John. Now, you weren't talking about me. Who's the John you were referring to?
I was talking about you.
No, you weren't.
John's production company. Yeah.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. Um, I want to thank you, Noreen, for that question, and I
I
want
hope
to
I
move
answered
on.
that question
I
well.
think you did. Here's another one. Are there any programs like Scrivener that either of you would suggest? Scrivener is a writing program. It's about staying organized. Are you familiar with Scrivener? Have you used it, Clay?
I think Scrivener is a wonderful program, and I've got a bunch of friends who use Scrivener and really um, promote Scrivener, and I am a complete Scrivener failure. So there's the extreme of the two. My mind just does not work that way, and I think that's really the important thing. I don't think one size fits all for anybody. There's a lot of different writing programs that are out there. And I'm talking, John. This was directed to both of us, so you jump in if you don't want.
I have never used Scrivener. A lot of my students have.
It's a
Um,
wonderful program.
it is. It's so complicated that you can spend all your time learning it. And when you learn it, you probably have a master's degree in organization. So I teach a class on staying organized that I try to keep it simple so that it's not the tail wagging the dog. It's worked for me for 5 novels and still on the sixth plus the
Uh,
memoir.
and
So
and
I'm not
this is
slamming
what I write
Scrivener.
on. This is what
Yeah,
I write on,
there you
and
go.
so that gets pulled off into into file folders for me. So file folders and Scrivener are pretty much the same thing because it's electronic file folders. But it for me it's the tactile having it there that
So you
works.
kill trees. Is that what you're saying?
Uh, only those that are needing to die, John.
Okay.
Yes,
There's
I am from. But do you understand, John? You're not as old as me, but I grew up on a typewriter that was not electric. You
I
know,
did too. I did too.
that's where and carbon paper, and that's
Yes.
how
Oh
we sent
yes.
things out to people was carbon paper because we certainly didn't want to go to a mimeograph, and that really blows probably some people's minds. A mimeograph machine, because that's the only other thing that I know was comparable at that time, because we certainly didn't have quote unquote Xerox.
Okay.
So for me, we just lost Anne Perry. I don't know if you knew that. The
No.
novelist Anne Perry, she just died, and her whole career she wrote on a legal pad. And to some of us old people, we just think that I was talking with Chris Grabenstein just the other day, and you know Chris, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
he was telling me that Patterson writes on a pad as well. He doesn't do any electronic stuff, but there's um, uh, JT Ellison.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
she swears by Scrivener and loves Scrivener. So I really think what you need to do is just experiment and find what works best with the way that you think. And we talked about that earlier about how my thinking tends to be just just brain synapse all over the place. And then I try to collect these little things as they're falling from the sky and somehow put them into an order. And for me, my system works. But if you've got an order,
Right.
Scrivener is a wonderful way to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
There's another question from Gary Dinnerman, and I know Gary. Gary's got chops. He's worked with Warner Brothers for a while. He's an agent with BGA Beverly Grant, and he wants to know what the best advice is. Uh, what's the best advice you've ever received about how to write? And this is it's an interesting person asking a pretty thought provoking question. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, Clay.
well, I think probably the best thing about a young filmmaker writer is John. Well, one of my mentors was a studio guy named Lou Wasserman. You remember
Yeah.
talking about that, and his advice was write the damn thing. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the best advice I ever got.
Yeah.
So Gary, you probably already know that, so I don't think I've shared anything.
Yeah, and my advice is don't write to be fancy or writerly. Write to be clear. And don't be self-conscious about your writing because there's no one like you. You are unique. And so just write the way you talk.
Yeah, and I think it's even for me, it's even more basic. Mine is just right because you sometimes you can get caught up in trying to see if it's fancy or not fancy or so. You know what I'm saying? I'm not criticizing you, John, but I think sometimes it even goes more basic than that. Just write something,
Right. Right.
just write it, and then you've got something to work with. As you know, that first draft for me, the first draft is the hardest.
It is. It is. It's terrible. It
And
takes
once
the rewrite is fun. The rewrite is fun.
is absolutely the best place to be. It's that first draft of assembling all of those unrelated ideas together into some sort of cohesive whole. And then once you have that, then you've got it. So the best advice I think I ever got is just write the thing.
And I would jump on that and say that one bit of advice that works for me is to write it the first draft straight through. Resist the temptation to keep looping back and make it better, because if you can get it all the way through to the end, it's done. It sucks, but it's done. And that means you've worked through all of the major issues, and then you can go back and make it better.
And you know, every stop sign that you come to when you're going down this path of writing, John, is going to make you rethink how that opening should actually be. So if you keep going back, as you discourage people not to do, double negative there, then you you never go anywhere because you keep going back to change and following your advice of taking it all the way through. You can actually see holistically now what needs to be changed, and again save yourself a ton of time.
Exactly, because when you finish the draft, then you read it through as if it's a book, and you already have the gold standard of what's a good book. And so when you read it, a lot of those things you're going to see almost 6 months after you wrote them. So that's probably your only chance of seeing it objectively, and you'll see the weaknesses, but you'll get a sense of how it measures up to what you consider to be a good book.
Yeah,
Um,
we all seem to shortchange ourselves too, and I think that's really the important thing about writing it.
yeah.
When I said really when you're writing, I wasn't really concerned about writing something good. I was just as happy to write something that was bad, and I think that that's really the attitude that propels you through because you really don't know when you start out, as you well know, John, what's going to be good and what's going to be bad, or what's going to work and what's not going to work. And
Exactly. Yeah.
and so just write it with abandon, and then after you have that first draft, look at it. So really, I just think that's the best advice.
Well,
Just
Richard McGonigal comments, "You can't edit what you
Richard.
haven't written. You can't edit what you haven't written."
Yeah. Hey, Richard.
So, this is fun. We could talk all day. I'm certainly looking forward to being with you
Airtime,
in.
airtime is cheap, John. We can just stay here all day, you and I.
Well, I mean, it works for me. What what do you want to talk about? What have I not asked that you'd
Does
like
anybody have
to?
any other? Does anybody have any other questions? I think it would be great if we.
Yeah, there are none at the moment, although I rarely do get questions. So that's a tribute to you that people want to know
No,
a
it's a
little bit
tribute
more.
to me that they've turned off and there's nobody listening except Richard. Thank you, Richard.
No, there's still a handful plus there'll be it'll live in infamy on the internet. So, but I mean, is there anything I'm not covering that you'd like to talk about?
Not that I know of, John. I mean, I'm happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about, but I think if primarily people who are watching this are writer related, I really do think that that's just we have so many demons that we carry around in our heads that keep us from producing what we want to do, and I really think that writing with abandon is what you really, really, really need to do. And
I bet.
then where it goes from there, you have limited amount of control on that. We like to think we have control. We like to think we can buy marketing with Amazon and whatever, but you have limited amount of control what happens after that. So just enjoy that process of writing and then do it if you feel it.
Do you have any there's a authors writers guild strike that's going on now? Do you have any thoughts on that?
None.
Okay. Okay. Fair, fair. Is that a no?
I think every few years you need to reevaluate where the electronic and distribution media are going, and making sure that everybody is being equally compensated the way that they need to be compensated, because what was negotiated under one platform may be open-ended for something else, and somebody can exploit the writing without you having any receiving any advance on that. And I think that it's just something that needs to be addressed every few years. And it's good that people do it. And sometimes, and I understand, having been, a suit as well in the studio system, I understand both sides of it. I'm a union guild member myself, and I understand both sides of the situation. You've got to reach the bottom line, but at the same time, you have to be fair to people. And there's just, it's like Mr. CNN. It's like politics. It goes one way, then it goes another, and you just have to find that equilibrium every few years.
Based on your experience, are you satisfied that there's been an increase in diversity? In other words, more women getting opportunities, people of color, other genders. How are we doing? Are we making progress? Is the trajectory going in the right direction? What's your take on that?
I don't know that I think that that would be someone else that you need to have on your show that could give a better, insightful answer than I do. I don't. I think that I think that it has been a problem too long, and I don't know that it's a problem that's going to be solved. And I think you've got to be careful we don't go one way too far or another way too far, that we try to address the situation that's there. But we've definitely got an issue, and we've definitely got a problem. And John, being a child of the 60s and 70s myself, I grew up in movements that was trying to equalize things, and there was a period of time that I really you know uh, thought that, oh, we really made a difference and solved some things. And then you look back and go, we just, on some of these things, we just put a band-aid on. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot of hurt and that needs to be healed, and a lot of people that should have been given opportunities that were not given opportunities. And I think we've got a long way to go on that. And I have lived long enough, and I love history. You and I have talked about that. I love history, and I see the way history plays out, and I just wonder, the pessimistic side of me goes, will we ever solve and arrive where we need to arrive? But we just plug away with it the best we can. But I think that that's you need a perspective of people who are actually in, say, a minority situation, talking on it, rather than me talking on it, because I can only see it from my perspective, if that's being fair.
Yeah, and you do have some experience as a journalist as well, am I right?
I've written for a newspaper, yeah. And
And what's your take on journalism today?
oh, John, you, you just want me to step right into everything, don't you? I think I think that journalists today um, are being very well trained. I think journalists today are still coming ideologically out of school with wonderful hopes and dreams of being Woodward or Bernstein. And for those of you who are not old enough, go look those up. Woodward or Bernstein. And I really think that that is there. But I think the economics, once again, you were talking about fickle, with Hollywood, and I said, really, it's a bottom line thing. A lot of news outlets now, it comes down to financing, not news. And I've also, the thing that I really, so they, a lot of stuff is coming off the wire, as opposed to actually people doing some investigative reporting. And I also hate the communities that, and not hate's not the right word. I am frustrated as I travel around that no matter, it's like you turn on the TV news to watch the local news, and it's like you're at McDonald's. It doesn't matter which city you're in, you're still getting that network feed into the local. And whereas before we used to have all these wonderful local programs that told the local flavor and things that were going on in our community and stuff like that, and we just don't have any of that anymore. And once again, it's because there's a whole mentality that, again, this needs to be visited or revisited on, you know, we've got the internet, which is providing free music, free movies, free news things, you know, whether it's correct news or incorrect news.
Yeah,
There's
free falsehoods.
free everything. But and then you have this brick and mortar building with a bunch of satellites that's trying to stay in business, and they're having a tough time going up against that. And so I think a lot of reporters come out with the same idealism, you know, as Edward R. Murrow, but they don't have necessarily the opportunity to be Edward R. Murrow just because of the way things are going. And I understand, again, from the economics of the news organizations, they've got to stay in business. They have to stay in business. So it's maybe there's going to be, because the internet is now, you know, settling to some degree. We've pretty much found our parameters and things, and people are always ingenious about making money and figuring out how to capitalize on what's there. And I think that hopefully we'll come back to that. But I think journalists are great. And so I'm gonna leave it at that. And I think they have always been great, and they are vital, absolutely vital.
Definitely that.
As people.
When I interviewed you last year at Killer Nashville, I asked a question, and
You asked many, if I recall.
yeah, not as many as I wanted, but I wanna circle back. I'm taking a risk here, but you know, you've been an actor. You were on the soap opera Days of Our Lives, I believe it was,
That was
and you almost reacted viscerally when I brought it up. It was correct me if I'm wrong. Is this PTSD? What was that experience like? My kid, we used to watch this show all the time when I was when Cindy and I first got married.
And what's really interesting, Jacqueline told me, she said, when you got out of the car that first time, I knew that I had known you from somewhere, and I didn't know why. And then it was like, I don't know, we had been dating and then maybe even gotten married and stuff before she ever found out. And she's like, that's where I saw you before. I think that my surprise was that you just dug that deeply into my background, and it was absolutely a wonderful time. And
what role did you have? What was the role that you had on the show?
I played a role of Anthony Marston, who was a reporter. And it was supposed to go into a long recurring role, and it just never did. And so I ended up moving there, and that's when I went to Florida to work with PBS. And so that kind of like nixed that character's
one of my favorite movies is Tootsie, which of course is set in a soap opera. Is that a pretty? I mean, obviously it's a comedy, although there's some serious strains that are part of it as well. But did they capture it? The soap experience pretty well.
Yes,
do you think?
Absolutely, I think so. Exactly. Yes.
Do you miss that kind of television?
Jacqueline asked me that night before last. We went to see a production, and she
said, I'm in good company then.
She said, do you miss it? And I said, no, I'm where I am right now. I lived it and I enjoyed it. I've got a ton of pleasant memories, and especially a load of friends who are from that environment. And do I need to go? Do I feel unfulfilled? When you say miss, that implies to me that there's something that's unfulfilled. And no,
Mhm.
when I left Beverly Hills the last time, I was pretty much made up my mind that it was a new chapter that I was going to write, and I left and uh, came back east, and then ended up meeting Jacqueline and stuff, and my returned to the south, and so I kind of just got it out of my system and went. I went. It's kind of like selling the books and stuff. I really it just exceeded what I had ever imagined. The number of books that I was selling, I was expecting. Somebody said, "What were you expecting?" I thought maybe we could sell 400 copies or something, And then what I didn't bank on was the fact that Walmart buys them by the pallets, and Costco buys them by the pallets, and Sam's Club, and Target, and there was all these special editions that came out and stuff, and I would talk to the editor and hear, oh yeah, they just sent out a pallet of 20,000, and I like, jeez, because there's people who are on the New York Times bestseller list who would love to sell 20. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
And so to have the editor tell you, yeah, they just sent out another pallet of 20,000. It's headed for Los Angeles, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and it's kind of went beyond what I was thinking. And so I tend to always. I'm a builder. I think that that, John, and I think that when I've done something, it's not quite as appealing to me as I want to go. I want to accomplish something else. I want to do something else. And so I think that when I left acting, I'd been there. I'd done that. I did what I set out to do. As a matter of fact, I did more than what I wanted to do. When I was a studio exec, I did more than what I ever thought possible. And getting to know different people. I mean, these are people I can remember. Do you remember Pat Paulson?
Sure. Smothers
Okay.
Brothers.
Yeah, yeah. So I used to watch. As I was a kid actor, as you know, started acting professionally when I was 10, and went to New York and hung out with Pat Paulson, and I had been seeing him on the Smothers Brothers and Laugh-In, and he was running for president. And
Right.
I don't know if he was really running for president, but he always said he was running for president.
Well, he said he was not left. He said he wasn't left wing. He wasn't left wing or right wing. He was middle of the bird.
But I think even on my website, there's a picture of little 10-year-old Clay sitting there with Pat Paulson.
Cool.
And so just those kind of experiences, I feel like I've kind of, done that, and I'm just moving on to the next phase of what I'm working on. And I don't know how many, years I've got on the planet, but I'm just trying to fulfill and live all of them the best I can. So it's all just kind of like continuing onward. So to answer your question, in a short answer, do I miss it? No.
Well, and I, for one, am glad that you have moved on, because I would argue that through Killer Nashville, you have, reached tremendous numbers of people in a quality way and in a long-term way. So, Killer Nashville and
You
the
know,
mark that you've put on it has been a tremendous positive influence for a lot of people.
well, I appreciate you saying that, John, because it really, I think that you do reach a point where, I mean, I was always, I mean, I'm Southern. I feel fortunate to speak in English, and to find out I'm doing 16 languages, I'm like, completely um, flabbergasted by it. And could I do 17? Yeah, probably 18. Yeah, but it's kind of like the tarnish is on there because you did more than you expected to do.
Yeah.
And I think you get to a point where I've never, John, when we did the interview, I think we talked about living in cars and stuff,
Yeah, you
right?
mentioned that, right?
And so you never forget. I remember somebody told me that when somebody lived through the Great Depression, they always lived in the Great Depression. They never got out of it. And I
That's
can
right.
remember those days, and I can remember that loneliness of of being isolated, because we talked about it, that some of my relatives had no running water, no electricity, very rural, very Appalachian, and to be in that sense of isolation. And it doesn't matter where that isolation, you can be in the middle of a city, but feel that isolation, that you have no hope, that you
Right.
have no way of getting to that point that you dream about, or being able to do what you want to do. And it's never left me. And I have, with Killer Nashville, and some of the other things I've done, I always try to reach out to those people that have those dreams and feel like there's no future, but there is a future. There is, it is there. You just gotta find the right people, and so that's what the Killer Nashville experience is all about, trying to connect the
So
right people.
people can get in touch with you through your website, I'm assuming, claystafford.com.
Yeah, it's easy. Contact at claystafford.com.
Okay.
And you could look at killernashville.com if you want to look at the conference
Okay.
itself. And I do respond, and I do give advice, and for whatever that's worth. But I do try to answer everything individually that comes to me. I'm very slow. So if you don't hear from me in 2 weeks or something, don't say, well, he just kind of blew it off. No, I didn't. I will get back.
Well, we could talk for a long time, and I'm certainly looking forward to sitting down with you in Nashville this August, and probably next August as well, when BoucherCon will also be in Nashville. We've been talking with Clay Stafford, who
Did
is
you know
the
that I was one of the guest of honors at BoucherCon?
I think I did hear that, as a
Yeah,
matter of fact.
yeah. So I'm excited about that. I was. They called and told me, and I was like, "Are you sure?"
Well, they don't have to pay for your travel, so
No, I don't. But
it's all about the budget there. See,
yeah,
right?
it is on time, on budget.
We've been talking with Clay Stafford, who is the founder and CEO of Killer Nashville, which is coming up this August, and it's an annual conference, excellent conference. Clay is a very approachable, friendly, kind man, and this has been delightful. Clay, thank you very much for doing this.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, no
Same
matter
here.
what we're doing.
Okay, I'm John DeDakis. You've been one to one with me, and I've been one to one with Clay Stafford. Thanks, Clay.